What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Nitro Show. I'm Burl.
And I'm Streit.
And today we're going to recap the Army-Navy game. We're going to talk about our first round of the college football playoff, give our predictions, and move on to the coaching carousel. There's lots of movement around with coaches to different teams, a few big names, going to some familiar places, and then all of the transfer portal madness. So it's going to be a good show today, but thank you so much for spending your time with us today. Please make sure to hit the subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss any updates. Like the video, drop a comment, and share with your friends. It really helps the show grow.
And if you're listening to us on audio, be sure to like the episode and leave a comment or a review. We'd love to hear from you.
All right. Navy beats Army in a kind of a shocking turn of events. Really ran away with it, 31-13. What did you see?
Well, I said last week that I thought Navy was going to win, even though my heart was with Army all year long. Army coming in this game, having to play in a conference championship game the week before, I think really played a part in this game. You know, Army and Navy typically is the biggest game of the year for both of these teams, but Army had to turn its attention to something else this year. Focusing on trying to beat Tulane for the American Conference Championship. So what happened? Navy came out and pretty much dominated early in the game, got up early on Army, and when you're running triple option offense, having to pass the ball is not usually a recipe for success. Right out of the gate, Navy got the ball to start the game. They went on a six-minute touchdown drive, took the lead. They were up 7-0. Army had the ball, and then Bryson Daly threw an interception to Deshaun Peel, and that led to a 14-0 lead for Navy. And they never really looked back.
Oh,
go ahead.
Yeah, the passing was atrocious. I mean, it was some god-awful throws out there, but that's not what they do. So, it's kind of to be expected.
Right. Well, even after Navy had taken that 14-0 lead, Army did manage to score the next time they had the ball. It was on a little shovel pass, actually, of all things. They got them back in the game. They got it within 14-7. I think, and then Navy was able to stretch that lead back out to 21-10 later in the game. There was a nifty little pass. They ran a kind of a out route to their fullback, Heidenreich. Sounds like he should be on Breaking Bad or something. Caught the pass and just rumbled and stumbled all the way down the field.
Yeah, damn
and
right.
That put him up 21-10. And then it was just kind of hold on there in the fourth quarter. Army was trying to get back in the game. They converted a fourth down near the 50-yard line by a penalty. And they drove down. They had a shot at the end zone, but Daly missed another wide open receiver. And as you said, bad passing. They missed a huge opportunity to get back within a few points, ended up getting a field goal. But after that, Navy settled in. They kept it going. They ran a fake punt later in the game where they snapped the ball to their nose tackle, Landon Robinson. And it was big man stumbling down the field, big number 96, just running down the field.
Stumbling.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, Navy ended up getting another touchdown. They were up 2 scores in the fourth quarter, and with Army trying to pass and come back, it was pretty much over at that point.
Yeah, Navy pretty much ran away with it. One thing that I thought was really cool is the Army's uniforms. I thought they were super clever. So they were a tribute to the Battle of the Bulge. And if you've seen Band of Brothers or know anything about World War II history, Battle of the Bulge, it was really cold. It was in the winter. There was a lot of snow. So you'll notice that on the Army shoulder pads and helmet, it's just kind of glazed with a little layer of white, and it looks like snow. I just thought that was super clever and really well done.
Yeah, and both teams always have special uniforms, and I know Navy had some that had the Jolly Roger on it, which was pretty cool. But I did notice the white on the Army uniform, but I hadn't read exactly what the purpose was before. And I was like, having a uniform that looks like you have dandruff, that's an interesting choice. But they both have really cool uniforms in the game. And this game is always fun. It means so much to these guys. You watch the end of the game and you watch how the two teams sprint back to all to the cadets and the midshipmen to try to sing and stuff after the game. But like I said, great effort from Navy in this game. This was actually the first time that there had been 40 plus combined points between these two teams since 2013. So it ended up, obviously, this being a pretty high scoring game. And, Army had dominated recently. I think they'd won 6 out of the last 8. So this was a big win for Navy. Obviously, both of these schools are moving on to their bowl games now. There was a complication right before this game. Army was scheduled to play Marshall in their bowl game, but Marshall's coach left to go to Southern Miss, and like 25 to 30 guys on the team opted out. And so Marshall had decided to back out of the bowl game. I thought backing out of the bowl games was a thing of the past because COVID was over. So they were left without a bowl opponent. Luckily, Louisiana Tech is going to step up. The game's in Louisiana, so Louisiana is going to step up and play Army in their bowl game.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but hey, at least another team gets to step right in there. And kudos to you, Streit. You called this one.
I did. I got to be right about something for once,
Well done. So we got the first round of the college football playoff, first ever expanded 12-team playoff. We got some really good matchups. So let's start with Tennessee, Ohio State. This is obviously like the matchup of the weekend, in my opinion.
By far, this is the best matchup of the weekend.
Yeah, I mean, two really, really good teams. I was just looking up totals, how they rank across the country, and Tennessee is actually ranked highest in total offense of all the first round teams. So that's interesting, and they're also one of the top rushing offenses in the nation, obviously with Dylan Sampson. But then you look at Ohio State. Their defense has been amazing this year. Number 1 in total defense and scoring defense.
Right.
And they played the 29th hardest schedule. So that's some pretty rock solid numbers. But then Tennessee's defense isn't far off. They were number 4 in total defense. So,
and number 4 in scoring as well.
Yeah. This is going to be an awesome matchup. It's going to be interesting, especially to see if the Tennessee fans were able to get tickets to the shoe. I mean, they were talking about taking it over.
Yeah, just based on chatter online today, ticket prices for all of the games across the country are dropping drastically. The highest one is Notre Dame, Indiana, and that's a state championship game. I think you could get into this game not much more than $100. And those Tennessee fans, they got this campaign going to buy up those tickets and try to take over. And the Ohio State fans aren't believing it's going to happen. But you give an SEC school a chance to buy your tickets in your stadium, they're probably going to take advantage of it. It's going to be cold in Columbus on Saturday. I think predicted highs in the 20s somewhere. I don't think that's going to be quite as much of a factor because Tennessee is at least a team that, sometimes does experience some cold weather up there in the mountains. But this game really is going to come down to the running games. Like, who can really get their running game going? Obviously, Tennessee relies heavily on Dylan Sampson. Ohio State coming into the year had this two-headed monster at running back, Travion Henderson, Quinshon Judkins, supposed to be an awesome rushing offense. It's really going to come down to that because especially if it's cold and if it's windy, snowy, whatever it might be, whoever can get that running game going is really going to help dictate how this game goes.
Yeah, I completely agree with that because you look at the quarterbacks and, we've said this before, Will Howard is a liability on that offense, which is kind of shocking when you think about it because everybody pretty much agrees that Ohio State has the best wide receiver room in the country. So if you have the best receivers, a guy like Will Howard should be able to find pay dirt a lot easier than a lot of other teams. But he was a big reason why Ohio State lost to both Oregon and Michigan.
Yeah, Michigan was able to push them around. I think Ohio State's got some injuries on the offensive line,
Yes.
which is part of the issue that they're having up front. And the inability to get the running game going, particularly in the Michigan game. It looked like in the Michigan game, they really wanted to control that game at the line. They wanted to run the ball, but they couldn't get it going. Howard made a couple mistakes, threw a couple interceptions, and that kind of, switched the game up. Ohio State's offense, is still pretty balanced. Like you said, they have a very good, deep wide receiver core and a deep running back room. On the Tennessee side, Nico Amayalava has been a solid quarterback this year, if not spectacular in his first year starting.
Job.
Yeah. He hasn't put them in a lot of bad situations, but he hasn't had the crazy numbers that you often expect out of a Josh Heupel offense. He didn't put up the numbers that Hooker put up a couple years ago, and didn't make the mistakes that Milton made last year, but still just not the hype hasn't quite been there in that offense. One of the most interesting things about Tennessee's offense is they're very balanced. Like I said, eighth overall in the country, but they're only 60th in explosive plays in the country, which for a Josh Heupel offense predicated on go fast, get those wide spreads, get the guys down the field, hit deep balls. That was shocking when I saw that.
Yeah. I see three main keys here for how this game's going to go. We already talked about the run game, whoever can run the ball the best, but also which quarterback is going to step up and make the bigger plays. Who's going to be able to hit that deep shot chunk play. Whoever is able to do that, that's just going to help the running game even more. But one I think to really watch for is penalties. So Ohio State is tied for 7th for fewest penalties in the country. So they're a very unpenalized team. Tennessee, on the flip side, is a very highly penalized team in both number of penalties and yardage. So that could put Tennessee in bad situations where they're forced to throw, and being forced to throw against that Ohio State defense is not a place where you want to be.
Right. I think that, this game really comes down to if Tennessee can get the running game going, that should open up a little bit on the outside for the pass. One thing that you noticed in the Georgia game, they got up early in the Georgia game, but they didn't hit any of those big explosive plays outside of the long run for the touchdown by Sampson. They didn't have any long pass plays that they were hitting, so they had to try to rely back on that running game. And once Georgia was able to kind of shut it down a little bit in the second half, Georgia steamrolled them. And I think this could be a similar situation. If Tennessee can't get their deep passing game going and they're totally trying to run the ball and they can't, Ohio State will totally shut them down and potentially blow them away. Not that I think that Ohio State is a much, much better team. I think these are both quality teams. I think if I was ranking, I think these are probably 2 of the top 6 teams in the playoff. Having this as an 8-9 matchup is nuts to me, because I think whoever wins this, the winner of this path ahead is insane to get to a potential championship game. The winner of this game is going to face Oregon, and then would potentially have to face Texas, and then potentially face Georgia if all the cards fell right. So if the winner of this game goes on to win the national title, they certainly deserve it. I will say that much, despite them both having 2 losses and not played in the conference championship game.
Yeah, these 2 teams have quite the gauntlet ahead of them, for sure.
So the line on the game, Ohio State's favored by 7. Burl, who do you think is going to win this game?
I still think Ohio State's going to win. They've got a better roster there at home. Playing on the road is tough no matter where you're going. But I think it's going to be close, because Tennessee is, in my opinion, a very, very dangerous team in the playoff, just with the fact that they're top 10 in both offense and defense, and they've been playing really quality opponents in the SEC.
Yeah. I agree. I think Ohio State's going to win. As much as I have respect for both these schools, I think Ohio State is just deeper and more talented than Tennessee is. I think playing at home will have a factor in this game. I'm going to take Ohio State to get this one done.
Awesome. All right, next big matchup is number 12 Clemson at number 5 Texas. We got a 11.5 point spread right now. Texas is favored, which I think is pretty spot on. So digging into these stats, Clemson is really good on offense. They're number 12 total offense in the country, so that's the second highest in the first round. But their defense has been bad. 66.
Which is very uncharacteristic for a Clemson team that even in the first game of the year when they played Georgia, Georgia kind of steamrolled them in the second half, but they looked very solid, particularly on the rush defense in the first half of that game.
Yeah.
It's just surprising. I saw that as well, to see Clemson fall that low, because the last few years, obviously when Venables was there, but just consistency year to year under Dabo. The one thing that they still have, even though Dabo hasn't taken transfers or anything, is they still have a very talented defensive roster. They've got a couple of awesome 5-star players that they took out of the state of Georgia. So yeah, that was very surprising to see that they've kind of fallen that low. Obviously, we know about Texas's defense. We've heard all about it coming into the SEC championship game. Consistently one of the better defenses in the country.
Yeah, Texas is probably the most dangerous team in the first round, just because of their defense, number 3 total defense, and we know that the offense can light it up. It just depends on which version of Quinn Ewers you get, or if they start throwing Arch Manning in there a little bit more.
I think you're definitely going to see Arch in this game. I'm very surprised we didn't see more in the SEC championship game. I think they are going to try to shy away from kind of the strategy that looked like they took against Georgia, which was pass heavy. I mean, Ewers threw it almost 50 times. I think they are going to lean back into their run game. They're going to get Arch involved to kind of give a change up out there, and let Ewers have a little bit of the pressure off him, because Ewers threw for a ton of yards against Georgia and at times, looked very, very solid. But when it came, towards the red zone and stuff, that's when he struggled. I think they're going to want to keep that pressure off him, because he seems to thrive in that environment where he's not necessarily having to be at the forefront. When they get that running game going, he really does well. So I think that, the strategy for Texas will be to keep pass attempts down, try to run the ball, get Arch involved, and get an early lead, and then kind of just beat Clemson down, because I think they are a little bit stronger on the defensive side. Now, the one thing I could foresee this game going a little bit towards Clemson, I know I just talked a lot about Texas. If both teams' defenses come out and are not having good days, meaning both teams are finding success and it's a higher scoring game, that's an area where I could see Clemson actually taking an edge. If it's a lower scoring game, or if it's, Texas beating them down, I think Texas wins easy. If it's a high scoring game, kind of gives me a little feel of 2022 Georgia versus Ohio State. Two teams with pretty good offenses that if they get rolling, they can really score a lot. And two good defenses, but when your offenses are cooking, you can throw good defenses out the book. So that's the one chance I see for Clemson. Kind of key players in this game. Obviously for Clemson, it's going to be Klubnik. Everything runs through him. He's got a lot of rushing yards, almost 500 rushing yards on the season, 33 touchdown passes, only 5 interceptions. So really good stats for Klubnik this year. For Texas, I think it's on the defensive side of the ball. Mukbucko had a great game against Georgia. I think he plays, a key role in them, limiting Clemson. So for my pick here, I'm going to go with Texas. I think they're going to put it down and they're going to beat them pretty good. What you got?
Yeah, I think Texas, and it's not even going to be close. It's just too much defense, too much talent on that Texas roster. And with Clemson's defense being how it is, I think it's a perfect situation for Quinn Ewers and the Longhorns.
All right. So moving on, the next game we've got on the schedule is the Indiana State Championship. We've got the Indiana Hoosiers, number 10 in the rankings, heading out to South Bend to take on the number 7 Notre Dame Fighting Irish. The Irish come into the game favored by 7.5 points. Obviously, a lot has been written about both of these teams. Indiana because of their, out of nowhere rise this year. Notre Dame because of that horrible loss early in the season, but then recovering and moving through in this new playoff world. So, Burl, what's your early impressions on this game?
This is one of the more interesting games, in my opinion, because both teams technically have really good defenses, stat wise. This kind of blew my mind. Indiana is number 2 in total defense in the country, but they have the 67th hardest schedule. I don't even think you can say hardest schedule.
Right. They played outside of Ohio State. They played the bottom 8 teams in the Big Ten. How did that happen? I have no clue, but it did. But you can only play the schedule that you have. You can't change the schedule in year, and it is a Big Ten schedule. They had the defending national champion on their schedule, and they beat them. They had another team that was in the playoff last year in Washington, and they beat them. So you can't knock them too much. I think Indiana this year really, really, really driven through their quarterback, Rourke. They've relied on him a lot to distribute the ball. And they've, like you said, they've won it with defense and scoring quick. But then on the flip side, you've got Notre Dame, and everybody points to that early season loss at Northern Illinois as kind of the sign, maybe, Notre Dame's not that good. They're paper champion. Their schedule didn't end up as great as it has in the past. But I did take a look at Notre Dame since that loss to Northern Illinois. They have scored 49 points or more in 6 of their last 10 games, all victories. And in a couple of those games, I think 3 or 4 of them, they've scored more than 50. So Notre Dame has been scoring a lot of points throughout the second half of the season. They really are built on their run game. Of course, they've got Riley Leonard at quarterback. He, transfer from Duke, runs the ball a lot. They've got 2 outstanding running backs in Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price. And then their defense is led by Xavier Watts. Great defensive back. He's got 5 interceptions on the season, 8 pass breakups. So you've got some stars out there for Notre Dame. I think this is going to be a tough task for Indiana. What do you think is going to happen in this game?
Yeah, I think it's going to be tough for Indiana. Notre Dame, I mean, they're kind of playing SEC football in a way, right? They play really good defense. They're number 9 in total defense. They actually lead the nation in defensive touchdowns, which is interesting. And then you've got that 3-headed monster rushing attack, Love, Leonard, and Price. Then they're all close to 1,000 yards on the year. So playing, especially this time of year, playing good defense and having a good running game, that will take you very far in a playoff run. And with it being at Notre Dame, I think it's going to be tough for Indiana. I think they're going to have a hard time moving the ball against Notre Dame. And I see Notre Dame running away with this one.
Yeah. I mean, much like I said a few weeks ago when Indiana went to play Ohio State, I think their schedule, they took advantage of it. And like I said, you can only play your schedule. But that being said, I think Notre Dame's going to play bully ball with them. I think they are bigger and stronger up front. And like you said, that 3-headed monster of Leonard, Love, and Price is going to run all over Indiana. I just don't think they have enough stars on offense to keep up. They've got a couple nice receivers, Surratt and Cooper, but they don't have blow-you-away stat. They distribute the ball out a lot, but nobody really pops out on the page. So I'm going to take Notre Dame to cover in this one.
Awesome. And the final game is number 11, SMU, the Pony Express at number 6, Penn State. Penn State's favored by 8.5. This one's probably the least interesting game to me. I mean, SMU, it's hard to take them serious right now. I mean, just looking at their stats. They're number 20 total offense, number 28 total defense. You play the 57th hardest schedule. They are the most penalized in terms of yards team in the nation.
Interesting.
So very undisciplined going against a Penn State team that, for all accounts, we know that they can't win the big game, but this seems like a very winnable game for Penn State.
Yeah, I think a couple of factors here. Obviously, playing at home, Penn State will have a huge advantage. At having a whiteout, and heck, it might be a snow whiteout. I think the weather will play a factor in this game. SMU is a southern team, and going up there playing on the road, cold weather, I think will favor Penn State a lot. I think you got to look at Penn State's second half versus Oregon as well. They were down and they were getting throttled pretty good in that game. They fought back, and they fought back on Drew Aller. SMU is weak against the pass. That's where they're susceptible on defense. So if Drew Aller plays like he did in that second half of that Oregon game, that bodes very well for the Nittany Lions to win this game. They've got two good running backs who have over 800 yards, in Singleton and Allen. One interesting thing that happened this week was Penn State's backup quarterback, Bo Prebula, jumped into the transfer portal. Why that is interesting is because earlier in the year, Drew Aller was injured and had to miss a game. And so he likes to run. In the cold weather, when you run, oftentimes you see more injuries. And so Penn State's going to go into this game without an experienced backup quarterback. So if something happens to Aller, there's a chance for SMU to hop in this game. SMU, relies heavily on the big play. Kevin Jennings drives that offense. Rashard Smith's got 1,200 yards, 14 scores. The receiving score is pretty spread out. Nobody has more than 38 receptions on the year. So they like to spread the ball around, give it to the running back, and let their quarterback drive it down the field. This is going to be a tough matchup for SMU, though. Penn State is bigger. They're at home. They run the ball well, and they have a good quarterback. Both teams are coming off close games where they played well in the second half of their conference championship games. But once again, as it looks like with all these games this week, I'm going to go with the favorite, Penn State at home.
Yeah, I think it's Penn State, no doubt here. It's going to be tough for SMU to play up there. Like you said, they're very reliant on big plays in the passing game, and cold weather makes it really hard to throw. And if you can't dominate on the ground, then they're gonna have trouble there. So, maybe the quarterback can get out of the pocket and do some running. As I know Jennings he can run the ball, but I look for Tyler Warren to have a really big game for Penn State. He's kind of their universal do everything type player. That we'll say poor man's Brock Bowers. So I think this is a game for him to have a big game, because if it's bad weather, and you're throwing the ball at all, you look to your tight ends as your security blankets there, and with him, they can get him involved a bunch of different ways in the run game, pass game. So give me Penn State. That defense is, I think it's just going to be too much for SMU.
All right. So that wraps up the 4 games that we have this weekend in the first round of the college football playoff. The second round games will start up around New Year's, but there's also a lot of bowl games that will be going on between now and then. I think the only significant bowl game happening this week is Florida is playing Tulane, which could be interesting to kind of see, if they continue to progress. But no other notable bowl matchups this week outside of these college football playoff games. All right, so while some of these teams are wrapped up in the college football playoff, other schools are just worried about their future. And that means that we've got the coaching carousel in full swing. We've seen some big, surprising names get hired in the last few days. Let's start right there at the top. Bill Belichick is back in coaching, and he's back in college football coaching the North Carolina Tar Heels. Bro, what do you make of this hire for North Carolina?
It's freaking weird, man. This is a weird hire. I don't understand it. at all.
They got rid of their 74-year-old coach to hire a 72-year-old coach.
Yeah. And, congrats to UNC. I mean, Bill Belichick, by all accounts, is the greatest coach of all time in the pros. But how does that translate at college? Because you don't have contracts. You don't get to draft players. You have to recruit. I mean, it'll be interesting to see how he adapts to recruiting and how that fits in with how he runs a program. Because he did give UNC a 400-page Bible of how the organization is to be ran.
Right. I think it's interesting to understand what his plan is. He's 72 years old, coming in to take over a program that for a long time people have seen as, one of those programs with potential. North Carolina is a very historical athletic program. They have a lot of money. Now it's generated by basketball, but they're always seen as one of those schools that could always just be on the cusp. If they just poured a little bit money into recruiting or just did this, they could make waves in the ACC. And they've always just never quite gotten there. They've had coaches come in, they've had some good years, but never kind of lived up to those expectations. So it'll be interesting to see if he can bring his system, which his last few years in the pros, after Tom Brady left, kind of wasn't working. He's going to bring that to the college game. It'll be interesting to see the staff he puts around him and how that shapes the game plan that they have. But yeah, it's real interesting to see what that's going to be.
I wonder if he even makes it to next season as coach. I really do. I feel like this could be like a really weird situation where he takes this job and now NFL season comes to an end. The NFL coaching carousel kicks in. It's only a $10 million buyout.
Yeah, but nobody wanted to hire him last year. Like, he interviewed for the Falcons job. Falcons didn't want to hire him.
I think he actually walked away from that.
You think?
Because there was an article the other day about how Bill Belichick felt about Terry Fontenot's just his arrogance of how he drafts. And I found that really interesting.
Considering that Terry Fontenot's drafts have been very questionable.
I'm mad at the Falcons. That's a whole nother story.
So yeah, this is a weird one. We'll see what happens. There was another couple of interesting moves that happened. Dan Mullen is back in coaching. I thought for sure we were going to see him at his cush little job on ESPN for the next few years, but he's taken the job at UNLV, which is interesting because UNLV was very close to potentially making a playoff spot this year. Maybe if their quarterback hadn't quit, or if they could beat Boise State in that conference championship game, they may have been in the playoffs. So he's picking up a roster and a team that had some success as a Group of 5 team. So we'll see what happens. Coaching was never the problem with Dan Mullen. It was the recruiting that was the problem. And so if he can go out there in the desert in this day and age of transfer portal and bring some players in who want to come and hang out in Las Vegas, maybe he can turn something out. What do you think? How do you think that's going to go out there?
Yeah, that is the question. Can he recruit? He didn't want to recruit when he was at Florida, and we saw how that turned out for him. It's probably not as big a deal at a school like UNLV because you don't have the same expectations that you have at Florida or even Mississippi State for that matter. And so there's probably going to be a much more relaxed environment for him. So I think it's going to be, I think UNLV is going to be good at their level, right?
Yeah.
If they might have 1 or 2 years where Dan Mullen's able to get just some ridiculous player, quarterback primarily, if he's going to get any great players, it's going to be a quarterback.
Right.
Because he's a great quarterback coach. I mean, what he did with
developed
Scott and
Kyle Trask.
Yeah, Kyle Trask. Oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah.
Great work in college. But I think they're going to be fine. But it will be interesting to see how well he recruits and how much he puts into it.
Yeah. So we had a couple of other interesting moves. We had 2 coaches go back to their former jobs after taking better jobs somewhere else for a few years, returning home. Rich Rodriguez is headed back to West Virginia, and Scott Frost is headed back to Central Florida. Obviously, Rich Rod left West Virginia, almost got the Alabama job famously before Nick Saban got it. Been many, many places since then, including Michigan, Arizona, and a couple other stops along the way. But he's going back home to West Virginia, where he led them arguably their best success ever for that school. They were one stupid loss away from playing for a national championship. If Pat McAfee could make some kicks, they would have. And then Scott Frost, going back to UCF, he kind of built that program from a program that was winless to that year where they claimed that national title, even though they didn't win one, and kind of helped set the tone for that offensive juggernaut that Josh Heupel ended up stepping into before he left to go to Tennessee. Obviously, Scott Frost, the experiment going back to his alma mater at Nebraska didn't work out, but now he's going back to the place where he actually had success. And, Central Florida's in the Big 12 now, so maybe a chance for them. He's taken over for Malzahn. We'll see what happens. Going back home, maybe he finds the magic that he had there early in his career.
Yeah, I think the Rich Rod back to West Virginia is probably the most interesting one out of, all of these, just because he did have some terrific success at West Virginia. But is he going to, Pat White ain't walking through that door. Steve Slayton ain't walking through that door.
Pat McAfee ain't walking through that. Oh, wait, he might.
No, Pat McAfee will walk through the door. He already did. He was there to greet him.
They were serving beer at his press conference. Like, who serves beer at your coach's introductory press conference? West Virginia does.
That's awesome. You sure they're not in the SEC?
Yeah. So like I said, overall, the coaching carousel is definitely spinning. One other job to mention, Barry Odom did go to take the job at Purdue. I always liked him when he was the coach at Missouri. A good defensive coach, bounced around. Purdue's kind of had some down years after they always like to play the shocker and jump up and beat somebody they shouldn't every year, but they've been down, kind of the worst team in the Big Ten. So we'll see if he can go there and kind of turn them around. It'll be tough now that the 2 other schools in this state are both in the college football playoff. But we'll see what happens there. All right, so moving on. Our last topic for the night is the insanity that is going on in college football right now. The transfer portal. Oh my God. What are we living in? Like, it's basically if you took NFL, the whole NFL season, and the week that the playoffs starting, everybody's contracts are over and they can go sign with somebody else. That's basically what you've got going on. You've got players that are on teams that are in the playoff going into the portal. You've got guys who are going to be counted on in the playoff going into the portal. You've got guys transferring for their 3rd and 4th times in their career. You've got tampering going on left and right. You've got players going in the portal, getting more money from their current school and going back home. It is absolutely nuts. And it's really one of the things that I hate most about current college football. I'm all for the players getting paid and having some freedom, but I really wish they were on contracts.
Yeah, absolutely. It's chaos. Like I understand why Nick Saban retired. And he's like, I don't want to fool with this. It's too much.
I didn't think it would get this bad this fast. It got you saw it in college basketball, where it went from these teams are changing over 3/4 of their roster every year. And it happened real fast. But I was like, nah, that's not going to happen in football. But you look around, you've got teams that got 25, 30 guys going in the portal. Like, that's nuts.
I know. Marshall having to back out of a bowl game because their whole team basically went into the portal.
But even Marshall, a smaller program, I mean, you've got schools in the SEC. Like Arkansas has got like 30 kids in the portal. Like that's nuts. Like solid programs, and you've got kids. I mean, the drama going on with the kid at Alabama, who 5-star player, freshman. Rumors that he got a huge offer from Ole Miss, goes in the portal yesterday. Today pulls himself back out. So what happened? The Alabama boosters coughed up the money, but there was rumors that he was getting this offer from Ole Miss and he wasn't even in the portal yet. The one thing that is supposed to be enforced is tampering, which clearly is not being enforced. It's just crazy. Like so many players moving and players moving for second and third times, especially with, people on the last years of the COVID contracts where they have 5th and 6th years to play.
Or 8th.
Hey, I think
Cam Rising.
Cam Rising. Oh, the quarterback from Oklahoma State did decide to go pro. So he did decide to not come back and start for like the 7th year. But
I mean, I hope they have their doctorate at this point.
At that point, they should.
I mean, seriously.
That tight end from Miami.
What year is he on?
I think he's played in 8 seasons or something like that.
Lord.
Yeah.
What is happening? I mean, that's just silly. It's just, I knew as soon as they changed the rule that you could transfer anytime
and as many times as you want, I knew all chaos was gonna break out, because you're giving these players license to do whatever they feel is best for them, which, again, I'm all for players getting paid, but as a team, like, you need some kind of stability. And if you're going to pay somebody, like, there has to be some guidelines around, you only get paid if you play, if you stay on the team, right? It's like, if I don't go to work tomorrow, I don't get paid. Right.
So
I think the craziest thing here is these wild demands for some of these players that haven't even played much. They're
You see the Texas Tech one?
Yeah, that's what I was going to talk about. Micah Hudson, the receiver from Texas Tech, who had a list of demands, and it was
cars for his whole family.
Cars for his whole family, and the craziest part of the whole thing was the final demand, which was the family will decide when he plays and if he's injured if he doesn't play. And like, that's nuts. This kid, he was a 5-star at high school, but he didn't put up like hardly any numbers this year at Texas Tech. But then he's going to, guess where? Texas A&M, where they continue to just spend. It's the same, and that's the thing. It's the same programs that you keep hearing. It's Texas A&M. It's Ole Miss. Over and over and over. It's Auburn. It's these programs that are so desperate to win now that they're just coughing up money. But you look at a school like Missouri, okay? It was a big deal when they got Williams-Nwaneri to come there last year. There's the famous video of Eli Drinkwitz like jumping around like an idiot because he's kind of a tool, but jumping around because they got this 5-star kid to stay in state. Rumors were that, some big boosters coughed up the money to do that. He was there for 1 year, and now he transfers out and took tons of money and is going to Nebraska. So next time he tries to go, Drinkwitz tries to go to his alumni and say, hey, we need money. We want to get this player. Those same guys going to cough that up again? They're not. They're not oil money.
It's almost like devaluing the recruiting process.
Oh, it's totally devaluing the recruiting process.
Why spend all this time trying to recruit players to come in as freshmen if they're just going to leave right after their freshman year? Like, why not just wait to see which 5-stars are hitting the portal after their freshman year?
Especially for quarterbacks. Yeah. There are so many quarterbacks in the portal. And if you look at what's happening, at Ohio State.
Yeah, that's shocking to me. Aaron Nolan going to the portal. But think about it this way. They have 2 other guys on their roster. Well, one's an incoming freshman and another kid who's already there who are 5-stars. Aaron Nolan was a 5-star in like one service and 4-star in another. But if you're looking around him, they recruited, they had Julian Sayin, who was committed to Alabama, who switched to Ohio State, like signed with Alabama, but then flipped to Ohio State like immediately. And then they're bringing in like the number 2 kid in this class. So Aaron Nolan is sandwiched by 2 highly recruited number 1 quarterback in their class and number 2 quarterback in their class. Like,
That's nuts. Why do these kids keep going to Ohio State? But why? But like I said, if you're another school, why would you spend money on a kid out of high school if they're not starting and they're gonna get mad and transfer anyway?
Yeah,
I mean, you
'cause
saw
90% of the time, your freshman is not going to be starting.
right, right. So you've seen some big names. Jackson Arnold transferred to Auburn. Tulane's quarterback Darian Minson transferred to Duke, which caused Malik Murphy, who transferred from Texas last year during the playoffs, to go into the portal. Now we don't know where he's going yet. It's just nuts. It's just
Yeah,
I really don't like it. I'm a loyalty person, and I just wish they were on contracts because this kind of stuff every year just kind of makes me sick. But it is what it is. It's the reality of the situation, and if you're going to be a fan of college football, you got to deal with it. You don't have to like it, though.
yeah, and that's one good thing about Kirby Smart. He embraces the situation. It is what it is. It's very stoic and principled. Right. So I really appreciate that about him because, like I said, he accepts the situation for what it is, and he goes out and does whatever he can in the system that is there. Right. The other big problem that you were talking about at the beginning is the schedule of the transfer window is
it's absolutely horrible.
dumb. It's absolutely dumb. It's like you said. It's like, okay, we're going to allow free agency to start as soon as the playoffs start.
Right.
It makes no sense whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it really boils down to a couple things. Number one, for players to transfer and then be at their new schools for the beginning of spring semester, some schools start, first week of January, first full week. So some of these kids have to get transferred or they're not going to be eligible. But college football playoffs run until January 20th this year. Like, the season's not going to be over. So do you create exceptions for teams that are still alive to be able to transfer after the fact? But then if you are trying to transfer players and take transfers, how do you handle that? Like, they have the exception, now where if a coach leaves, they get 30 days to transfer. That's why, like Caleb Downs transferred last year to Ohio State, and that was after all the transfer window stuff. But it's really bad. I think the NCAA could step in here, but they're so hands off and so worried about their antitrust that they won't do anything. They won't police anything. Yeah. They won't change any rules about eligibility. So it is what it is.
I wish they would just have one transfer window right after spring practice.
Right. That's it.
Once you do that, you're with the team for that year. And
that would solve a lot of problems.
If you don't win your position, in spring, transfer. Cool.
Right. Or even that, it could be it opens at spring practice. Let it run through summer until the start of summer camp. If you want to transfer anytime in the summer, let them transfer. Why is it limited to this 30-day window or whatever it is, or shorter windows now? So it's like, the first window is longer and that second window is only 10 days or something. Like, to me, you should just have, like you said, should have one window open up after spring practice, let it run until, there's a cutoff date when the new year starts, which is usually around August 1st. And then you go.
Yeah. I think that would actually solve a lot of these problems, in lieu of there being contracts being implemented.
Yeah. Well, they won't get contracts until they make them employees, and they can't get that until this lawsuit is done where they can start revenue sharing. Once they get to revenue sharing, then the players can become employees.
Bargaining, yeah.
But until that, it's going to be the Wild West, and they did it to themselves. So
they absolutely did. So who does Georgia go after?
I think Georgia, I think from the needs perspective, they need at least one receiver. Obviously, we had a couple of guys transfer, and we've got 5 seniors. So we are bringing in a bunch of guys, but we have a bunch of seniors going out. I think you're going to need a defensive back because you had Julian Humphrey leave. I think you're going to probably look for at least one guy along the D line with Jamal Jarrett leaving. And then you might be looking at a running back because I think you're going to probably have a couple of running backs leave after this season as well. particularly as ETN comes back. I think you're going to have a couple guys leave. So you probably want to bring in somebody experienced at running back. And it wouldn't surprise me if they brought in a quarterback. That may happen after spring practice, but whoever loses out the starting job next year, be it Rashada, Stockton, Puglisi, somebody along those lines, one of those guys will probably transfer out too. So just to have experience, because at least Stockton will have some starting experience and Rashada has starting experience, but to get some experience, you might see them bring in, an experienced player, not necessarily to start, but to be a solid backup if you need it.
Or Beck comes back.
Or Beck comes back, which technically still happened, though I don't see it happening. But that's a topic for another day.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that'll wrap us up for this week. Once again, thank you for tuning in and listening to the show. We really appreciate everybody checking us out. Last week was a big week for us. We appreciate the new audience that we have. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment, and we'll get back to you. But until then, go Dogs.
Go Dogs.